Welcome to the Bible Feed podcast, a place for conversations about the Bible and faith in the modern world, where ordinary people come together to help each other understand the Bible better. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are back again. Welcome back, and we're going to take a different tack in our conversation for this episode. My name's Paul Davenport, and I've got Dan Weatherall with me, and we're going to talk about history and the Bible. There's a pretty complicated sort of relationship that there is between the Bible and history. But we're going to try and distill some of the issues and some of the perhaps the perspectives and right ways to think about history and the Bible by looking at a test case. And we're going to look at an individual, a king, King Hezekiah, which you may have heard of. But if you haven't heard of it, you'll certainly know a bit more about him by the end of this conversation. This is in half an hour or so. So firstly, Dan, why should we spend time on this kind of question? What are some of the issues around history and the Bible? What are we trying to resolve here?
Yeah, good question. So the Bible and its relationship with history is complicated, like you've said. And probably made so much more so because there are sort of various extremes of different views. On one hand, there are people that will claim that the Bible is just a collection of myths. It doesn't have any basis in reality or anything like that. On the other hand, you'll have people that claim that every single thing in the Bible is literally true. Every single reference to a certain phenomenon or event or anything else is accurate history in the order and all that sort of thing. So
okay.
A big spectrum.
So you've used two terms there. You've used myth and history, and there's a little bit of a question. Okay, well, what is a myth and what is history? Is there such a thing as accurate history?
That's right. So myth. I've used a term where you've got to be careful to define it. So in terms of everyday usage, which I think is what I was referring to there. Myth is something which doesn't have a basis in reality. It's a legend. It's made up. It's that's what people generally say when they use the term myth. I think if you start going back to sort of how scholars would look at ancient texts and how if they would talk about something as myth, that doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't happened. But so I'm sort of using it there as this is something that doesn't have real substance. It didn't happen at a particular point in time. And then real history, is assumed and defined as something that, really did happen. And so the question is, we've got something like the Bible, which talks about lots of things that happened, that seem to happen. And the question is, well, are those things exactly as they happened? Are they true, accurate history? Or are they mythic? Or are they legend? And that's gives you a flavour.
Yeah, and that, I suppose, starts to tease out that there are shades in between those two extremes, depending on what a particular text might be trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the Bible is diverse as well. Right from the back, you've got a diverse collection of different things, trying to do different books, trying to do different things, and so one answer might not be the right answer for everything.
Okay, but we want to focus on a test case and try and work out some principles from that. So let's get into this case study. So set the scene for us. Who is this guy, King Hezekiah?
Okay, Hezekiah. So we're talking about a king from Jerusalem, around about 700 years BC. So long time ago.
Yeah. And
Jerusalem being, of course, the city in Israel, ancient city then. And he's a king in this capital city of Judah, the small region of Judah. And it's basically a very mediocre, low influence state. This is a small kingdom in a really highly turbulent part of the world.
So Jerusalem? I've heard of Jerusalem, but I mean, how many people are we talking? What's the sort of size of a city?
Yeah, so I can't quote any numbers, but I remember recently thought about the size of the city at the time of say Hezekiah or Jesus and whatever, and actually it's it would be pretty much a sort of medium-sized village in the UK in terms of area, square mileage or whatever. A lot more densely populated than a typical British village, of course. So lots of people in a hustling and bustling, but it's a small place.
Okay.
Compared to the big players in the world, things like Egypt and Assyria, who we'll talk about a lot more, and then a little bit later on the big Babylonian Empire or the Persian Empire, and there's lots of empires around. Hezekiah isn't a king of an empire; he's king of a small city-state.
Okay, so sounds like he's a bit of a minnow, really, a bit irrelevant, and in a large pond with some pretty fierce large fish swimming around in it. So, but where you've given us a little bit of background there, but where are you getting that information from? Is that just generally accepted historical information, or what data do we have? Where's it coming from?
Yeah, so we've got a few different sources. Okay, so and this is why this is such a good example, because we can look at the different types of sources, we can take them in turn and evaluate them, and that's what we're going to do. So we've got within the Bible itself, there's quite a few references in different places to this king Hezekiah. So we've got the book of Kings, 2 Kings, and there's a couple of 2 or 3 chapters there, chapters 18, 19. We talk about Hezekiah and what he did. You've got the book of Chronicles, so 2 Chronicles, and there's a few chapters around about chapter 29 that talk about Hezekiah. So they're part of narrative that talk about all the different kings and the dynasties in both Israel and Judah. So a lot of detail is there. And then you've also got in the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah's a prophet, and he describes, well, it's a big book, and there's lots of prophetic books, so oracles and words that he's given, which he claims are from God. That's the claim of the prophet. So Isaiah prophesies over a course of a number of kings, and it's he tells right at the start of that book, it says it's in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So there's a lot of source material in the Bible itself.
Okay, so in the Bible, he doesn't seem to be a minnow and irrelevant.
So like you say, he's quite a significant character in the Old Testament. So there's a lot about him, and it seems to have the events of his life seem to have influenced quite a lot of things. So absolutely.
Okay, and if he's got a few chapters in each of those Kings and Chronicles records, he's some of those kings just get a few verses, but he's got a few chapters. So, but if we're just looking there in the Bible, I mean, that's not really going to tell us anything about the interface between Bible and history, because it's just kind of a circular argument. So we need to think about outside the Bible as well.
Yep.
What do we find there?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of information, and we'll just pick on a couple of things. So before we sort of dive into the detail, there's things from Jerusalem itself. So we're looking at the history or archaeology of Jerusalem. So there's a few things to look at there, and then there's things from the nations around Judah and Jerusalem, the people who interacted with Hezekiah. We're looking at things like the Assyrian records, and specifically Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and what he said. So definitely we need to try and work out, well, the Bible is saying these things happened, X, Y, and Z. We've then got an archaeological record of something in Jerusalem, and then we've got what Sennacherib is claiming happened in Assyria. So there's quite a good
so those sources outside the Bible are not just artifacts, if you like. There's also some written material that tells us something. Okay, so perhaps as a way of breaking down this case study, then why don't we take each of those sources in isolation, and then we can think about how they connect with each other. So tell me first of all about what we would know about Hezekiah if we didn't have the Bible. So if we didn't have access to any of that Kings, Chronicles, Isaiah material, we've just got the stuff from outside the Bible. What would we know about Hezekiah? Yeah,
okay, so let's look at Jerusalem first of all. Now, I've never been. So perhaps most sort of famously is the Siloam Tunnel, and something you can go and walk through right today. So this is a tunnel under Jerusalem that was created, formed, dug from 2 ends and joined together. And the purpose of that construction, that engineering sort of feat, is to divert water courses.
Okay.
So it is.
So I've definitely seen pictures of that. Of people you can walk through it, and although there might be a bit of water in the bottom of it.
The water flowing, and it's a shallow gradient. And the point was to divert water. The best explanation for it is to divert the water source from outside the city walls to keep it within the city walls, so that any feeding force wouldn't have a supply of water if they were sort of setting up a siege against Jerusalem. So
pretty sensible measure.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think not universally, but pretty much generally accepted that this is from Hezekiah's time. So there's an inscription in the middle of the tunnel as well. There's something from the time period of Hezekiah. Of course, that it doesn't name him. We don't know anything about him yet. But we also get, so just thinking about that sort of time period, we get other examples of sort of really quick and hasty construction.
Okay.
So defensive things that the people at the time had to build in the city. So there's what's called the broad wall, which is a wall built very quickly. You can sort of tell from how it's thrown together, but it's many meters thick, and it's an example of people trying to enhance the fortifications of the city at this particular time. So around the same sort of time, and in terms of pinpointing the person sort of in charge around about this time as well, there's a seal impression that's been found that literally has the words on it belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah.
Okay, so we've got names and a little bit of context there. His father and the kingdom.
So we've got the kingdom of Judah. We know Jerusalem is the sort of epicenter of that. We know Ahaz crops up in the Bible as well. Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, and he's the king of Judah. And around about all this time, there's quite a lot of engineering and construction work going on, in a very short space of time, and it's all seems to be to sort of protect against the threat of an enemy.
Okay, so that's, this is fascinating stuff. I find this archaeological discoveries and piecing these things together absolutely fascinating. I think if I hadn't been an accountant, I'd have been an archaeologist. I just didn't get that far through the alphabetical careers.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So that's all about Jerusalem, isn't it? Yeah. With the tunnel and the seal, and this hastily constructed fortification, this broad wall. But what about relationships with the wider world and these other larger powers like Assyria? So these things are just little examples of which is what we're trying to do here. And I'll just give you one example of this of the outside world, and it's the Assyrians, because that's we'll drill down into some events in a moment. So the Assyrians wrote lots of records of the things that they did, very much like we've got in the Bibles, we've got Kings, Chronicles, sort of pretty much records of the things that the kings of Israel and Judah did. So we've got the annals of Sennacherib, okay, and I think they crop up on 2 or 3 of these prisms, these sort of clay prisms where they've written on the things that he's done. So one being Sennacherib's prism and the Taylor prism. And so he's recording quite a lot of his military campaigns and what he's doing and going around his empire and expanding his empire and so on. I think I'll read to you, not all of it, but some of the relevant passage. In Assyrian?
I'll translate it directly.
Excellent.
Okay. In fact, I've got one here that's been done earlier, so I'll use that. So he says this. He says, "As for Hezekiah, the Jew, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong walled cities, as well as the small cities in their neighborhood, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams and bringing up siege engines, by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches, I besieged and took those cities." There's a number of people that he says he claims to have taken, great and small, male and female, horses, mules, cattle, etc., without number. He says he brought those away from them and counted as spoil. Himself, so here he's now talking about Hezekiah, himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. Earthworks I threw up against him, and the one coming out of the city gate I turned back to his misery. So basically he's saying, look, I trapped him in a city.
Right.
I besieged it. He couldn't get out.
But he's named Hezekiah.
Sure.
There.
Like we say, if we can forget the Bible for the moment, we've got a seal with his name on. We've got some sort of defensive structures in Jerusalem, and we've got Hezekiah on the other hand saying he came and besieged the city, and he trapped Hezekiah in the city.
Yeah. So Sennacherib saying that. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Sennacherib saying this as well. Yeah. He trapped Hezekiah. Yeah. And then he says something else. Just a little bit later on, he says, "Thus I diminished his land. I added to the former tribute and laid upon him the the giving up of their land. As for Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him. And there's a little bit more about tribute that he gives and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, he was a humble chap. Sennacherib was just describing all the achievements that he's made.
Okay, so we've got a connection there between the artifacts in Jerusalem, the preparation for a threat, defensive things, fortifications, and now we've got Sennacherib saying, I came against Jerusalem and besieged the city, and he's saying he took all these other cities as well.
Yeah, and one of those towns, just this is interesting because it's something I have seen, and I think you will have too, is Lachish. So Lachish, some sort of 35 miles southwest of Jerusalem, and it's there's in the British Museum in London, there's that Lachish room, isn't there?
Yeah,
with all the friezes from Sennacherib's palace. I think that so he didn't just write about his exploits; he drew pictures.
Yeah. So but these are pretty impressive, carved in stone, full floor to ceiling.
Yeah,
depictions of many of those things that you've just read out. Actually, the way that they were storming towns and siege engines, and there's battering rams and archers and so on.
Yeah, and they weren't particularly nice to the people that they got hold of. They were pretty brutal, weren't they?
So that's what we've got from Jerusalem and from the wider world at the time, the major power Assyria at the time. So if we now bring the Bible into the mix and think about that as a source, what do we see from there?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of detail, but let's just pick out some examples. So first of all, I'm just going to look at passage in Isaiah. So Isaiah chapter 22 has a description. So a lot of Isaiah is in the context, like I'd said towards the start, in the reign of Hezekiah, and there's the threat of Assyria looming over the land all the time, because they're the ones that have the power, and Judah is a minnow. It's a small player in the world. So here's something that Isaiah the prophet says in Isaiah 22. He says that you saw that the breaches of the city of David were many. You collected the waters of the lower pool, and you counted the houses of Jerusalem, and you broke down the houses to fortify the wall. You made a reservoir between the two walls for the water of the old pool, but you did not look to him who did it, or see him who planned it long ago. And that last bit is referring to God. It's a little bit later on, he says that the Lord God, so the God of Judah, God of Hezekiah, is calling for them to sort of mourn and repent, etc. But actually, they all held a party. So, this is so there's something there, isn't there, of the things that we've seen just from the archaeological record. There's yes, you fortified the wall. You broke down some houses to build these big broad walls,
which is what you would do if you were doing it quickly. You would
definitely
knock down some houses, and build a wall out of that. Ready-made building materials. Yeah,
which is what we see. So, and then diverting the waters as well. There's this thing about collecting the waters and diverting it, and that seems to refer to that in Chronicles 32. It says that they stopped all the springs and the brook that flowed through the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?" So, and then again, there's another description of the building work that was done. You built the wall that was broken down, raised up towers, etc. There's a lot of sort of detail there. So again, there's things there that correspond with the things that we've seen. Okay. So then what happens after this in the rest of the account is that the Assyrians do come and they do besiege the city. There's a pretty terrible siege that happens, and it's you can find that in Isaiah 36, where Sennacherib comes up, and there's this chap called the Rabshakeh, so the governor, or the army general, the captain, effectively, who's there talking to the people on the wall and taunting them, and it seems like he's going to defeat Jerusalem and make Jerusalem like Lachish. But then in the biblical narrative, what happens is, after Hezekiah prays to God, in the night, the angel of the Lord comes and destroys many of them. The rest of them wake up, that many of the army of the Assyrians, that is, and the rest of them wake up in the morning, everyone's dead, and they all just clear off and run away. Okay. That's basically what's happening. So the Bible attributes a miraculous defeat.
A supernatural intervention. Okay.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that Rabshakeh, and I think it's in the Kings and Chronicles as well. He gives this speech to the people in Jerusalem and on the wall to persuade them to give themselves up, just give up the fight. So there's quite a bit of detail there.
Yeah, there's all sorts in there, and I suppose if you'd seen or you'd heard what was happening in Lachish and all the other towns as well, you'd feel like doing that, defecting or giving up. Sort of gives them offers of land and so on. You give up. Why should you stay loyal to Hezekiah and stay loyal to the God of Israel, to Yahweh, the God of Israel? That's
okay. So how do we piece these things together, and what do we make of it? So I can see some points of connection around the pool and the wall, the fortifications, the siege, but there are also potentially some differences, and then there's the supernatural intervention. But what I'm finding is that I immediately feel different about those two different sources. So we looked at some artifacts that were found in Jerusalem, and it's just a cold object. It's impersonal. Whereas this biblical source is inviting me into a story in some way. It's inviting me to take sides. It's asking me to make choices about the characters, and are they right or are they wrong, and in what they do. So there's some significant differences in that respect. So what do we make of that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, really, because when you look at, say, the broad wall in Jerusalem, it's not asking you to take the side of the people defending the city, or people attacking the city. It's just showing that there was this hastily constructed wall, there was some kind of invasion, and that's it. So cold hard fact about something that happened. So yes, again, someone dug a tunnel to divert the watercourse. That's it. That's the fact that happened. Hezekiah was a king. He sent letters. He sealed it with his seal.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's the fact, the cold hard fact of these things. When we move to both the Bible text and also Sennacherib's text, I think we're moving into a different sort of territory, aren't we?
Yeah.
These are things. The archaeological things are just snapshots of moments in history. But these texts are people's opinions on things, people's biases, people's views on the things that happened, people's views on why things happened, and people's views on how people should react to them. So both the Bible and Sennacherib's annals are going to be different. So
they're making claims.
Definitely,
aren't they? Sennacherib is claiming his almighty strength.
Yep.
And the biblical record is making some different claims about who's in control.
Absolutely, yeah. So just think about Sennacherib for a minute. He says that he shut Hezekiah up like a caged bird in Jerusalem, which seems to be what happened for sure, and because that's pretty much in all the records that we have. He doesn't say that he defeated Jerusalem. He doesn't say that, he doesn't say that he broke the walls down and defeated it and everyone was killed. He doesn't say that Hezekiah was killed. He doesn't say anything like that at all. He doesn't say that he lost. He doesn't say that his army were killed or decimated in any way. It's not likely that he would say that. And if this, the purpose of his account of his writing is to sort of demonstrate his achievements and his power and his prowess and his attributes as a good king and leader. So it doesn't mean it did happen or it didn't happen, but I think
it sounds like it was just silent on the outcome of the siege.
Yeah, I mean, it talks a lot about the tribute that Hezekiah gave, and actually, the Bible does has a few of these passages that talk about Hezekiah giving tribute, or him or people in his government giving tribute to the Assyrians and to other sort of rulers, big players on the scene. Yeah. So you get that both in the Bible, but also in Sennacherib's writing as well. Yeah. So he claims those things. There's things that he omits or seems to omit. So the question then is, what did happen? What's it? This is a reflection of something that happened in history, but it's clearly there with his bias or for his point of view. Okay.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Bible.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we've got a lot of correspondence with things like building the walls, digging the tunnel, all these things. They match the history that we can sort of uncover. But think about the purpose of the things that have been written. The Isaiah reference that we looked at, I think this is why it's a really good one to look at, talks about them diverting the watercourses, building the walls, etc. But the point, they're almost incidental details. The point that Isaiah wants to make is that you did this, but you're forgetting God. You're busily, hurriedly trying to defend against the Assyrians, but you're forgetting your God. You're forgetting the one that's made all these things, who has all the power. That's the claim of Isaiah and the claim of the Bible. That God wants you to sort of repent and transform spiritually and transform your religious worship, etc. But actually, you're rejoicing and having a party because either A, you're going to die because the Assyrians are coming, or B, you think you've fortified the city well enough. So the point of that passage there in Isaiah is far more than just sort of writing down history, and it's not writing down history just as cold hard fact or objectively. It's writing it to make a theological point. That's the whole point of this, isn't it? Really, there's no.
So it's not writing history for the sake of recording history.
No.
Or let's write this down so that future generations can read it and know what happened. It's in the here and now, making a message about their relationship with their God.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's interpreting the present. It's interpreting the things that are happening in the perspective of there is a God who is the God of Israel, and he's true, and he's done X, Y, Z in the past, and he can do X, Y, Z in the future, and that's the claim here.
And that maybe is why it feels a lot more like reading it. You're invited to make to take sides and to think about who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and think about the choices that we're making and whether they're and their relationship with the things that God has said, and that's really what it's trying to do. There's another interesting feature in these sort of records is that the defeat of Lachish is pretty much glossed over in the Bible records. It's not prominent at all. It just pretty much says that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, like he'd done enough, and that's very different from the Sennacherib getting back to his throne room in Assyria and building these relics to commemorate it. So it's kind of that's just kind of what you'd expect, isn't it? There, wouldn't you? I mean, you find parts of Isaiah that talk about the king of Assyria coming right up to the neck and overflowing the land, and so there's an acknowledgement that these things were going to happen and that they happened. And so it's not whitewashed. So you don't get, I think the point here is you don't get the full picture, or you don't necessarily get the full picture of history from the Bible, because it's not, the point of it isn't to give you the full picture. Here's a textbook of everything that happened. It's there as a sort of a record of the people giving a word from God that's an interpretation of the things that are happening around them, and it should then has a word, a message from God in that to them. So it's all sort of theologically motivated.
So if I understand what you're saying, it's that the purpose of that biblical account is more focused on this group of people in the city of Jerusalem, and they've got the Rabshakeh outside saying, "Give up, we're far stronger," and you've got Hezekiah telling the people, "Don't give up, trust in your God," and the choice that those people have to make. And so in that context, that what happened over in Lachish isn't so relevant to that.
I think that's fair. And remember that there were probably lots of different voices suggesting how they should react to this, including people saying we should buy them off, and that was definitely tried at a part of this, some point in this campaign. So
what can we get to as principles, things that we can learn from how Bible and these historical sources are connected, working together, not connected in other ways?
So I think we've got to sort of acknowledge that the Bible isn't there as an objective history textbook. Now, I don't think that it probably exists, actually.
That's a fair point,
Because when anyone writes about history, or writes a biography about someone or whatever, it is always to try and demonstrate our who was in the right, who was in the wrong, why things happen. So history is like that when people write it. So this shouldn't be a big surprise to us. I think it probably is sometimes a big surprise to a number of people.
Although there's a little bit more in a modern context, historians will set out to present a multi-sided view of what happened. So there's a discipline that is designed to bring some objectivity.
Yeah, there's modern methodology, isn't there, in history, historians, how they approach history. Yeah.
But I think we can say that these ancient texts are not necessarily trying to apply those disciplines. They're doing something else.
That's right. So it would be a mistake for us to assume that and bring those sort of methodology, assume that the Bible's using it, and then try and say, well, this thing is everything that happened and nothing else happened because, try and look at it and say, obviously the Bible's wrong because we know something else that happened, but it's not there. That would be failing to understand the genre and the ancient way of writing and the purpose really of what these narratives are. So this Bible isn't an objective history textbook. So that's what we've got to learn. And yes, there is an interface between the Bible, the narratives, and history. And I think the thing we can learn from this, it's a really good test case, which is why we sort of walked through it. Because there are these different types of sources. There are these cold, hard facts. There are things that have been dug out the ground, which tell you very little. It tells you nothing about motives and very little about those sorts of things. But then there are these writings, both the Bible and Sennacherib writing his exploits up, and they show bias, they show purpose in what they're trying to achieve. And so the Bible, recognizing that the Bible isn't there to try or doesn't claim to be providing the full picture, everything that happened, anything like that. It's trying to give you an explanation from the perspective of there is a God behind this, and there's a God that's in control. And then I suppose it's up to people from that point onwards who've sort of dealt with this text and all the other texts around it to come to a worldview that agrees with that or not. And that's really part of what the Bible's trying to do.
Okay. So let me try and summarize what we've covered. So we looked at evidence from outside the Bible. We looked at that first, and sort of a few cold, hard artifacts that are sort of data points in isolation almost. We've got some texts like Sennacherib's Prism, and if that's all we had, then historians could try and build a story around that as to what happened. And essentially, when we come to the Bible, we find that is giving us a particular story around those same historical data points, if you like. So it's giving us history, but with an agenda. Theological history, I think you called it. So it's telling a story that's built on that historical core, but it's really aiming to make bigger points about human beings and choices as to whether to trust in a God or not. So some of the details and some of the emphasis in that biblical account they're serving that greater purpose. There'll be details left out and details included in order to serve that agenda, serve that purpose. So is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Add to that or correct anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty. We started off with these two extremes, didn't we? Approaches, and I think it's probably fair to say with this example that actually this part of the Bible about the kings of Judah, specifically Hezekiah, and then people that followed as well, it's undeniable that there was a historical Hezekiah from all the different evidences that we've looked at. So there's some really points of striking agreement, which I think is worth bearing in mind. And then you get things like, the angel of the Lord going to kill the army of the Assyrians, and you ask, so did that happen? And there's nothing in Sennacherib's writing or from cold hard fact archaeology or anything to suggest that no, it didn't happen. There would be ways that you could think of, that naturalistic things that could very easily have caused an army to sort of be decimated almost overnight, like food poisoning or rats or disease or anything that would cause them just to give up and clear off, because a lot of them were dying. And so it's quite possible that those things happen. There's no reason to think that they didn't happen. The claim of the Bible is that this is in God's control, which is is, that's where it goes beyond the history, doesn't it? And that's where you can think more theological.
It's a theological claim rather than a historical claim.
Yeah. So to assess the history and either refute or agree with the points of history doesn't get you to that theological claim or the answer to whether that's right or wrong. That's something to look at independently of that. So that's I think useful to just think about. There's another way of looking at this is that it opens up a can of worms, because we've just looked at Hezekiah, haven't we? And a small bit of the Bible.
Yeah,
there's lots of other parts of the Bible.
Yeah, but I think that's been really helpful, and it's helpful when we come to other parts of the Bible where it is less simple and it's less easy to connect the details that we have in the Bible with firm historical data, like the Exodus or the conquest.
Yeah, things could guide us. The fact of just being aware of the different types of sources and the agendas behind them, I think that can guide us to look at other parts of the Bible history. So
I think if we kind of draw our test case to a close there, and it's given us some interesting things to think about and the ways to look at this history. And I think what we'll probably have to do is to come back in some future episodes and conversations and think about some other parts of the historical narrative in the Bible, what they might be trying to tell us in a theological sense as well as historical. So thanks very much, Dan, and thank you for everyone who's listening. And we'll be back soon. God bless. You've been listening to the Bible Feed podcast. Thanks for joining us. We're always keen to hear what you think, hear your questions or subjects you'd like us to discuss. Get in touch with us on our Facebook page or send a message from our webpage at biblefeed.org and be part of the journey.